Welcome to season 3.
Hi, Miss Tiro.
There's the star.
Hello. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. This is such a long time coming.
It is such a long time coming.
You're
I,
getting
the last time I saw you it was definitely before the pandemic, so before 2020. Maybe
Yeah.
19.
I feel like there was ice cream involved, or it was a show that we saw or something. And
Was it? No, I feel like we're getting something mixed up because remember we used to go when I used to do the critic stuff
yeah,
for. I think you're getting that mixed up with one of those dates.
because I remember there was ice cream after one of those things.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I know you are an extraordinarily busy woman, and we'll talk about that
Yeah.
in detail. So I think we're going to get this started and
Mhm.
rolling. Welcome to Change for the Better, the Power of Arts and Education, episode 33. I'm Stacy Tiro, a high school performing arts teacher for over 25 years. I've taught a lot of amazing people. Now that so many of my students are adults, they'll teach me how, through the lessons in my classroom, they have been changed for the better. So, I have a lot to say about my guest who's appearing before me today. And forgive the dogs who are like deciding that now is the time to go crazy upstairs. So, if you hear, that's them. Sometimes in your teaching career, you cross paths with a superhero. And these superheroes are the kids with an activist spirit, aware, very aware of the inequities of the world. And somehow they possess the energy and the drive to actually try and do something about it. So, my guest today was one of those rare teenagers that, despite the many and constant uphill battles that she faced, she was determined to make her voice heard. Now, back in school, in high school, she found as many outlets as she could to exercise those vocal chops. So, of course, there was thespians. We'll talk about that in a minute. But she was also involved with forensics and debate. She was the captain of the color guard on the marching band. She was the president of the NAACP club. She was president of her sophomore and her senior class. She was president of her own club that she created called Ladies of Light. And she was the lead organizer of Strong ER Students, which organized, notably, a rally that actually helped the district win a $3 million grant to restore arts and music and full day kindergarten in the district for 3 consecutive years. And that was many moons ago. And we had literally lost art and music and full day kindergarten for many years because of budgetary issues. And she fought against that successfully. So, like I said, she's a superhero. Dare I say she's a divine gift.
Oh.
So she made her creative mark in many ways as well. So in Thespian, she tackled shows like West Side Story and Aida. In her senior year, she ascended to the lead role in Nice Work If You Can Get It, where she crooned Gershwin standards like a pro. We also collaborated through the dance club, where she wrote and performed a spoken word prose called Where Angels Fear to Tread beside the dancers who created a movement piece that interpreted that work, and it was performed in several places. The result was a powerful social commentary on the state of racial injustice at the time, long before we knew the names of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and so on and so on. Alas, as is always the case, our brightest lights must shine elsewhere. And after graduating in 2017, she moved on to college to study entrepreneurship and graduated in the middle of this monstrous pandemic with a bachelor's of science in business administration. So she's now applying that, working as a social media manager for a Black-owned company called Somewhere Good, which I'm going to link in the blog. And since she apparently doesn't like downtime, she still loves getting her voice out in the ether. So she moonlights as a multidisciplinary music artist using that business degree to serve as her own artist manager. And she has created a year ago, I think today is the year anniversary, of her alter ego known as Melly. And she is building her own artistic empire that glamorizes the cultural worker and explores the same social justice values that she embraced as a teenager, unapologetically smashing the boundaries of art and the status quo.
Damn.
So, I put a lot of thought into that. Did I do okay?
Yeah, that was great.
Okay. Good. I'm glad. You deserve it. I also wanted to add that she's actually quite brilliant, and I'm sure you'll hear that in our conversation. So I think we're just going to get this rolling with question number one, which
Okay.
is, what is your name, the year you graduated, and tell me more about all the stuff that you're doing right now.
Okay, so my name is Melissa Denizard. It's actually pronounced as Melissa Denizard, but in America we say Melissa Denizard, and I'm also Melly. That's my artist name. I graduated from Spring Valley High School in spring 2020. Did I say spring 2020?
You did actually. That was college.
Yeah, literally 2 years ago.
Yeah.
No, I graduated in June 2017 from Spring Valley High School. I think I was 18 at the time. And yeah, I mean, since then I went to college and I did what, we strive to do. And I got my business degree. And then I found myself in the pandemic, I think like everybody else, not really knowing what to do. And also feeling like unsure of who I had been up to that moment or up to that point. And so I went through a lot of transformations throughout the pandemic. I think I had what I call an identity crisis. And then, I think a lot of things just worked out and I ended up doing music. I ended up pursuing it seriously. And I moved to Houston for a couple months and I made a music video. And since then, life has just been unfolding in a really beautiful way. So now I am a music artist and I get to create new worlds on screen and just like really creating the art of the future and in the art that's going to not only speak to the times that we're currently in, but illuminate new ways of being.
Mm.
And so yeah, that's what I'm doing now.
I've been sort of trolling your YouTube channel and your website and just kind of taking a look and seeing, your artistic perspective and how it's so bold. And it's definitely, I say smashing the boundaries. I wasn't kidding. There's a literal moment where she's smashing stuff. It's just like, yay. Get the aggressions out, girl. I love it. Trying to make yourself heard and known, especially in the way that you're trying to do it, which is like through sort of a cultural educational perspective and still trying to filter into this sort of pop world, blending those two worlds together, which I'm sure is no easy task, certainly. I have great admiration. I always have, by the way, but I have great admiration for your vision and your follow through.
Thank you.
Let's turn back now. So I want you to use your adult brain. We'll call it an adult brain. to describe your adolescent self?
Okay. I will say this conversation, I've been looking forward to it, but I've also been like not dreading it, but kind of just like weary of it in the sense of I haven't really looked back at my high school self like ever. I don't think so. And I tend to not do that. Like I just move on to the next thing. I don't reflect. I just keep going. And I think that, you know, my younger self in a lot of ways is reflected in my older self. She's very ambitious, or she was very ambitious, very dreamy, in a lot of ways uncompromising. Like, you know, I think a lot of the things I've done, people look at them and they're like, "How did you do that?" And I'm like, "Because I didn't give a fuck. I just wanted to, you know, I just wanted to get it done." So I think in a lot of ways, you know, I'm still very determined, and I think I owe a lot of that to my younger self. But I also think my younger self was, you know, very, very controlled, very rigid, and also like very vulnerable. And I think the reason why I was weary of this conversation is because I know that it would require me to be vulnerable. Because I think like a lot of the things that I was advocating against, they were not only outside of me, they were things that I was experiencing on an everyday basis.
Right.
And so, you know, like a lot of people don't know this about me, but like, you know, I was born in Haiti, and they can't guess that because I speak English so well. But like even learning English, like in our school district when I arrived, my brother didn't place me in an ESL class because in his mind he thought if I'm placed in an ESL class, there's no guarantee that she's going to advance at the pace that we need her to. Because in the district at the time, in most cases, if you were placed in an ESL course, you could round up in there for a long time, even if you didn't need to be.
Mm.
And so I learned English on my own. I learned English by reading and watching Dora the Explorer, ironically. And but like even saying that, like I don't think I realized who I was when I was younger. I don't think I realized my capabilities. I don't think I realized how brilliant I was. And I think my younger self, I was such a people pleaser as well. Like I really wanted to make everyone around me happy. And I think there came a point where I never felt comfortable with people complimenting me because it always felt like there wasn't enough brilliance to go around. It felt like, you know, like we grew up in such a desperate environment. So it felt like if I was being complimented, that it was being taken away from somebody else. And I didn't want that to happen. Just felt like there was never enough room. And so my response to that was to kind of like, I would still do these big things and accomplish these great things, but my response was to always downplay what I had achieved. Like you could say, Melissa's brilliant, Melissa's a genius, Melissa's this. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, what are you talking about? Like, stop saying all these things. Like, don't even talk about it. Like, I just wanted to disappear in a lot of ways. And I think like my vision was short-sighted, but I couldn't see past what I was seeing of myself because my environment was like it was like I was living a double life. Like, you know, who I was at school and who I was publicly was completely different from what I was experiencing behind the scenes.
Mm.
And so I think in a lot of ways my younger self, like she was a chameleon. Like I don't think I ever really allowed anybody to like know what I was going through and what I was going home to. I think it was just like from a very young age I learned like this world is something you need to be ashamed of. And when you go out into that world, you need to be a completely different person. You need to be exceptional. And so I just did it, you know, because I had to, not because it was like, you know, something innate. I just knew that this is what I had to do if I wanted to get out of my environment.
Is the work that you're doing now, like with Melly, you know, now sort of being pushed into the forefront, and is that a way that you're trying to reconcile those feelings?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, everything I'm doing now is informed by my desires when I was younger. Like I always wanted to be on TV.
Mhm.
Always wanted to be the star. I always wanted to be like the person that was visible. But at the same time, it was so ironic and so paradoxical because I wanted this, but at the same time I didn't feel comfortable admitting that to myself. It felt like, again, like something selfish. And so, when I was home, I would be watching award shows and like watching music videos and just trying to repeat everything I was seeing. And unconsciously, like, training myself. Like, I was the kid that would be in mirrors practicing award speeches. Like, like, this is what I'm gonna say when I win the BET award. This is what I'm gonna say when I win the Grammy. Like, I'm ready because I've been preparing.
Right.
But like, that was who I was privately, but publicly, like, and this, like, in dance class, I had such a hard time moving, because I was so self-conscious. What I would tell myself is like, you're not good enough, so don't even try. Or like, don't try too hard, or like, or don't put yourself out there because that's vulnerable.
And yet
And
you
yeah,
did.
and I did. And I did, and in other ways, right? And I think in ways that were more physical than spiritual. I think I would do things, and I would do, and of course I believed in them. I was completely convicted to it. But I don't think it was necessarily that my heart wasn't in it, but my spirit wasn't in it. I was so opposed to being vulnerable that I just became this shell, protecting my spirit, but like, my physical form was like a shell to just shield my inner form from ever being hurt. And
And
so
this was in high school.
I think it started in high school. And then I think, or maybe it didn't start in high school, but I think it intensified there. And then I think it's continued throughout, the rest of my life.
Yeah, so that protection, that was a protective instinct,
Mhm.
and like a coping mechanism that you
Yeah.
developed. And so now, do you think that's still the case, or are you now sort of finding ways to break through that?
I think I'm now learning how to break through it. But to be honest, it's still very hard for me to be vulnerable. I don't think I ever really allow anyone in. Like, but I'm so good at making you think you're in.
Mm. Mm.
But like, it's like I'm an onion. There's so much more to peel and whatever. And so many people are. But I think for me, I stop at a certain point, and that's typically like where it ends for most people.
Yeah, while you were having those experiences, and there's a story that I want to tell, but I think after I ask this question and you answer it, because there's a really
Okay.
important story that I want to tell about you. But first, what was something that happened either in the studio or in the theater, in the rehearsal process, the performance process, that helped you to manage or regulate your adolescent self?
I think it was about just having the space to create, and like, just without limitation. I think that for the first time, it felt like I had a space to kind of just be. And even though I had limitations within myself of like how vulnerable I wanted to be with my dance movements, or how open I wanted to be in front of a crowd, just being able to see what Black kids were able to do with like music and movement, like, I think that changed so much for me. And I think that, like, in a lot of ways, I think for a lot of people, I think thespians in your studio, it really became a home, like, for, I think, like, a lot of us who felt undesirable in some way to the world. And I think like that was what was most special about it, was just like having a place where I could just go to and just be. Because I think something I think about you all the time is when you told me, whatever happens outside of my studio has nothing to do with me. Like, when I close the door to the studio, like, nothing else matters. I create my world here. And I think that's something I've carried with me, because that's what I do now. Like, whatever's happening in the world, like, I don't, like, I'm paying attention to it, but I don't care that it can't affect, like, I don't want it to affect or limit what I'm able to dream about, or what I'm able to achieve. I have the power to create my own standard, my own world, my own expectation. I learned a lot of that by like having the permission to just dream and create and just do, through, thespians and the studio.
Thank you for saying that. And I'm glad. And that's my whole, I don't know, mission is to make sure that any student who crosses my path realizes that they have that same opportunity and that same ability to be creative and to feel okay with it. I really wanted to tell this story because it sort of demonstrates to me who Melissa is. So this was Aida in 2016. She was a junior. She was playing on Hebka. And now you know the story. You know the story I'm going to tell. She was playing Nehebka, and she was beautiful and gorgeous and all of that. And opening night, Brianna Knight, who was playing Aida, brilliant, gorgeous, and she's episode 8 of this podcast. She wasn't really feeling right. She wasn't feeling well, but she wasn't the kind of person to miss a show. Like she's a pro through and through. Knowing that she wasn't well, I was like, we need a plan B just in case. I doubt we're going to need it, but just in case. And I went to Melissa and I said, look, she's not 100%. She's going to do her best and hopefully we'll get her through the show. But I'm putting you on standby because we can't not we can't not go on. The show must go on, you know, as it always must. And of course, you know, Melissa's reaction was like deer in the headlights. I said, no. There's no, take a
But at
script.
the same time, I don't even think I fully understood what you meant. Like,
Probably.
I was like, okay, like, you know, this sounds nuts, but like,
Yeah.
okay, it probably won't happen. So,
Right.
cool.
And it was nuts. Looking back, it was nuts. So act 1, and Brianna is brilliant and she does great. And she hits that like that last note, the powerhouse note at the end of act 1. And the lights go out, the curtain closes, and she collapses. So of course I'm called back. I'm running backstage, and I'm like, plan B is in effect. And Melissa went, what? I was like, get your script. You're going on with a script. And this is what, and she did the entire act 2 on book, but flawlessly. And she wasn't even the official understudy. At the time, I didn't really have an understudy because I was like, Brianna's she's not gonna miss a show. That's not gonna happen. She'll be fine. And Melissa pulled some sort of magical something out from her soul. And she finished that show as though she had been rehearsed enough. Meanwhile, she kind of like, she was watching the show. She, you know, kind of knew things were going on, but somehow like this divine intervention came in and Melissa like single-handedly saved that show on a moment's notice.
On a moment's notice.
That's who Melissa is. She makes things happen even when it seems impossible.
Yeah.
Just take that in. Okay, so I'm gonna sort of flip this back to you. What are some of the lessons that you learned in the studio and the theater that you think about or use today?
I mean, I think everything I know about performance really comes from being in theater. And I even think about how dramatic or how big I do things, you know, like everything is a production with me. And it's because like I've seen what's possible to make when you have nothing. And we literally had nothing. Like we would put entire shows together. Like I'm thinking about my introduction to thespian Troop 721. Like it was literally in the Heights, which was arguably like, who was doing it like us? You know what I mean? Like who was putting on a show like that? And especially like with kids like us, like we were from the hood. Like we were not the type of kids that you would put on a stage and you would expect that level of excellence from. And I think that for me, it's understanding that like that was our capacity with no investment, you know, nobody seeing us, nobody co-signing us, nobody wanting anything to do with us. And we made magic on those stages. Like we created entire worlds that like pushed people to keep going despite everything that was going on in our lives for like months on end. And do you know how hard it is to organize kids? Like it's hard.
I
But we
do.
would show up to rehearsal every day at 2:15, whatever, 2:05, whatever. And we would just like coming from 7-Eleven with our coffees and whatever, and just like get into it. But that's what kept us going. And I think for me too, it's knowing that if you give people a vision to work towards or to build towards, they will do it. And not only will they do it, but if you communicate to them how this vision is also going to enhance them and who they are, they're going to believe in it just as much as you do. And so I think, those are some of the lessons I learned, really how to make something out of nothing, but not only just a thing, how to make something magical and beautiful, something that's going to change your whole life on a stage within a 2-hour framework. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think those are some of the lessons I learned from being under your tutelage. Just learning how to be a performer. Like everything I do now is big, 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 but also everything I do, there's a story to it. Like I'm always telling a narrative, and that's because I understand the power of theater. I understand the power of performance, the power of being able to turn words on a page into a whole universe.
Yay. Yay.
And like I did want to say too, Tiro, like that story you told, I completely forgot about that story. But that is such a special story because like that's a testament to what I'm saying. Like, I don't know what came over me. I'm gonna be honest with you, I hadn't even listened to the entire soundtrack. I had no idea, what was going on. Right. So how did I know how to sing those songs? I have only heard Brianna sing them every now and then. So I think for me, it's just like recognizing at every single point in my life, there are moments I cannot explain how they happened.
Mhm.
But like you said, it's divine intervention. It's a godly act. And I think that's also something I carry with me is just like who am I when I'm at my highest self? Who
Mhm.
is that person? And
Mhm.
I think for me that I always go back to like that's my most godliest self. I'm doing things I can't explain. A lot of those moments are I've experienced them on stage. Yeah, those are the lessons I've learned.
Good. How have you changed since you graduated from high school?
I think I'll start with the good ways that I've changed. I think I've gotten a lot more outspoken.
Mhm.
I've gotten a lot bolder, which is to say a lot because I was already really bold.
Sure.
I think I've gotten more focused,
Mm.
and I think I've gotten more brilliant. Like, I'm gonna acknowledge that. I think now I'm able to take in an idea and then
Mhm.
make it my own. Whereas before, I think I was really good at like understanding ideas and pushing them forward.
Mm.
But now I think I'm able to like create my own ideas, like synthesize different things and create my own. Which I was doing that, but it wasn't in the same way it is now. Like it feels just a tad bit more high stakes or just more real now. On the flip side, I've gotten more open, but I've also gotten more closed off.
Mm.
Like recently I had an experience that took me back to the past, but not in like a good way, like in a really bad way, like in a way that it triggered me emotionally. And I was back to being like a 17-year-old kid who didn't have a lot of friends, who was really lonely and just felt ostracized.
Mm.
What's something I struggle with a lot is like having anxiety and like a heightened state of paranoia. Because I think, especially at the time, I think overall, when you're organizing or when you're in that type of work, like it feels like you're being watched all the time. And I felt like I was being watched all the time.
Right.
um,
And you kind of were
yeah.
because but and I don't look at it as a bad thing, right? But when you take really bold action, people on the outside are going to look in and as out of interest and sometimes out of judgment, I guess. I think that it happens. You were, and I say this word again, sort of unapologetically acting on what you felt was right and what you felt was important.
Mhm.
And most adolescents don't have that kind of confidence in their own power. And you did.
Yeah.
And maybe it didn't always feel that way, you know, but I think these things were so important to you because of your upbringing, because what you saw, you felt wasn't right, whatever the combination of factors, you did follow through with it. And yeah, there was visibility that, kind of couldn't be helped.
I think that you're right about that. I think like what was most surprising for me was I didn't realize that that would happen.
Mhm.
It never dawned on me when I made the decision to start like being a social justice advocate, which was a very unintentional decision. I just wanted to raise money, like for girls in Africa. Like literally, that's what I wanted to do for young girls who had been kidnapped by this terrorist group in Nigeria.
Mm.
And it turned out that I was really good at it, and I really liked it. And so I kept on going. As bold as I was, as ambitious as I was, like I was still a kid. I had never gotten into it because I thought I was going to get attention, or because I thought I was going to get accolades. I just did it because I wanted to. I wasn't expecting the visibility. It's crazy too, because I think being this kid who wants to be this superstar, and then you finally get the thing and you're like, actually, I didn't know this was the thing. I didn't know this was the experience that all of this was.
Like this is part of the experience.
Yeah. It's so funny that we're having this conversation now, because that's a realization I recently came to, where I was just like, I always tell people in a joking way, I did not expect this music thing to work out. Like I was partly just joking, y'all. Like when I said I was a pop star, like I didn't think people would take me as seriously as they did. I thought I was gonna have to work for it a little bit longer. But people really latched on, like, no, Melissa's a pop star. That's what she said. That's what she's gonna be. I think everything has been happening like back to back so quickly. And that's great. Like that's a blessing. And at the same time, like I just wanted to make a music video. And it grew into this really big thing. And so now learning how to grapple with that visibility has been a challenge, because I think as much as I love the spotlight, I'm also like it takes a certain type of level of skill and comfort within yourself to really sustain that level of attention, and also that level of expectation. I feel like regardless of how old I've been, people have always had a very high expectation of me. But it's really because I set the expectation. Nobody else did. And a lot of times the expectation was set without even knowing it. Like I'll just do something and people are like, oh, this girl's really smart. Like, oh, I'm expecting A's from her every single time. And I would give them A's every single time, because in the culture that I grew up in, like if someone has a high expectation of you, you just do it. You don't delineate from that expectation. You don't ruin your reputation. And so, yeah, I just feel like it feels like a cycle. Like now that I'm looking back at my younger self, it feels like I've gone through these battles before. And it's just like learning how to not repeat the same mistakes or the same lessons over and over again.
On that thought, what would your adult self go back and tell your high school self now to help ease the way?
I would ask her to like really take a step back and just look around. Take your time and look, and then look at yourself in a mirror or something. Like really see yourself and realize that whether you like it or not, like you are exceptional, like you are brilliant, and stand in that. I think I had a thought the other day, and I was like, I've wasted so much time not respecting who I am and what just naturally comes to me. I wasted so much time downplaying myself. I wasted so much time trying to dim my light so I could, help others shine. And it's not to say that that makes me like regretful, because I wouldn't take any of it back. But I think it's to say that as much as I was pouring into others, I should have been pouring all of that into myself as well. And I wasn't. I feel like I was running on E, and I just kept on going because I felt like I didn't have a choice. I just felt like I need to keep on moving at this pace, because the alternative is nothing. Again, like it felt like I was living two different lives. If like I felt like Hannah Montana. I was going home. I was going home to like a really like desperate environment. Like my family and I, like, we lived in a 1 bedroom apartment from the age of 5 to 18. Like, when I went to college, that was my first time ever having my own bed, you know, and I'm like, that's crazy to think about. But that was my life. And then I would go to school and you would see me dress so nicely and you would hear me speak so well and eloquently. But that was all a mask to really try to hide like what my reality actually was, which was in a lot of ways, like not much. I just feel like I had to keep going because if I didn't, then my future would be at stake or like who I could be would be limited.
And the funny thing is that, you know, you're talking as though those two lives were separate, right? I mean, you sort of kept them separate, but really they existed together. Like in your heart, in your mind, they existed in the same person. I knew that your home situation was really difficult, and I always marveled at just how I say how well, I don't know if that's really the right like word, but just how well you were able to not just present yourself, but live in who you wanted to be, despite whatever you didn't have at home or coming into the school building. That whole idea of making something out of nothing. It's not technically nothing, it's just not the wealth of resources that other people are maybe used to having. But your resources were who you were and how you thought and your ability to organize and your ability to create. Those are valuable resources, especially when there's not a lot of other financial things that are available to you. To me, having that puts you far ahead of other artists, other activists, activist artists, whatever, because you don't need to have all those resources. But if you do have them, imagine how much further you could get your message across. And I think that's what you're starting to do now.
Yeah. In thinking about the work that I do now, a lot of it is really focusing on people who come from similar environments like me, like who are the most marginalized. You know, there's this concept about like when you're a Black person, you exist at the bottom of society. Every bad thing, you have more potential of experiencing it. Now, if you add additional identities onto that, so if you are a woman in Black, if you are queer in Black, then there is a bottom to the bottom. Growing up, I grew up in the bottom of the bottom. And not only did I grow up in that bottom, I knew so many other people who were experiencing the same realities. Like the same way I was hiding my home life, so many other kids were doing the same, you know? It's that level of struggle that shapes my perspective now. I'm very much like, how do we go deeper? What are we not seeing below the surface? Because I promise you there's more. As an artist, I'm really interested in working with the ugly, you know, the things that we don't want to look at, the things that we don't want to acknowledge. Because for so long, like I felt unacknowledged, I felt unseen. I want to create art that's going to speak to those experiences and that's going to illuminate that type of stuff. How we make meaning from that ugliness is going to shape the types of decisions we make, the types of futures we dream about. Because I feel like once you hit rock bottom, once you hit the bottom of the bottom, like all that's left around you is like the remnants of everything else that may have gone wrong or everything else that you don't have access to. Like that's all that's left. What I have learned to do because of where I grew up is I've learned how to make meaning out of those remnants. Now, I don't know if that's always the healthiest thing to have that type of mentality. As much as I'm interested in the ugly, I think I'm so used to it that now that my life is so much better, I feel like it's a fluke. Like I feel like it might go away. I had a conversation with God the other day and I was like, yo, like this is the most free I've ever felt in my whole life. Like this past year I've never felt this expressive before, this powerful in my body before. But because this is the most free I've ever felt, I don't want to let it go. Like Jennifer Lewis has this thing where she says, once you get free, you don't play around. You don't ever want to see what existed before that. But I feel like because this is the most free I've ever felt, I wasn't holding on to it in a healthy way. I was clinging on to it, in a way where like it wasn't healthy. It was almost like you couldn't breathe.
What if it goes away?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think for me, because of that, I felt like I had a newfound sense of protection over myself, over this freedom. When you start feeling that way, when you start feeling like it can be taken away from you, you start to act from a place of lack. As great as my life has been, going, I don't think I've really had a chance to fully appreciate it, because in my head I'm like, I need to keep working.
You're still processing the trauma.
Yeah. Yes, because again, like this shift, it was like night and day. And I still have such a long way to go, but it's like, this is so much better than I've ever known. I don't want to go back to what existed before this moment.
Do you think that's what you're grappling with the most? Is that sort of balance between the freedom and the not freedom of your past? Like, is
Yeah.
the number one thing that you're grappling with?
Honestly, I think so. Like the more that I sit with myself and, really, really have deep conversations and reflections with myself, I'm just like, everything goes back to childhood, as it always does. Like everything goes back to the things I never took time to process. And also like a lot of the heartache I experienced as a kid, or as a girl. Like I think there was just a lot that I went through being an organizer, or just being a regular Black girl. Like even before I was organizing, like there were so many things, so many traumas that just were stacked on top of each other.
Mhm.
As much as I was like in this mindset of like keep working,
Mhm.
it was like trauma. It was like keep going, 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 like keep hitting her.
The thing
And
that was driving it was
yeah.
the trauma, not necessarily the passion for
Mhm.
whatever it was that you were fighting for.
Exactly. It was like stacked, back to back. And I don't
Mhm.
even think there was time to process, because it's like as soon as this fire was put out, another fire starts. At a certain point, I just got really focused on how do I dodge these fires? How do I keep going, despite, all the different landmines around me?
Next question. Can you tell me one thing that you miss about your high school self? Not high school, but your high school self, who you were. And one thing that's gotten better since you became an adult.
One thing I miss about my high school self.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be bad if I didn't say anything?
It's not, no, it wouldn't be bad.
I don't think there's anything I miss about my high school self.
No.
I think I've managed to take all those things with me, like all the things that I think were great, at like great things to have. Like I
Mhm.
think I've carried them with me, and just have either refined them, or like have kept them really sacred to myself.
Mhm.
Because I think everything else, like the insecurities, the self-deprecation, I think I'm learning how to put those in a box and just bury them somewhere, or like
Keep
mourn
them.
them,
Yeah.
because I think I don't want to dispose of them, but I want to mourn them, and recognizing that like this was who I was, and it's okay. But I
Mhm.
don't have to be that person anymore. And you said like, what's one thing in your adult life that you would?
One thing that has gotten better about yourself.
I think what's gotten better is how open I am now. And I think being in the music industry, it's like you shouldn't be so open. You should be closed and whatever. But I actually think that's what makes me Melly, or that's what makes me Melissa. Like
Mhm.
I think being not only open to other people, but also being open about sharing who I am
Mhm.
and what my struggles have been, and really being open about this transformation of going from not having this lifestyle to having it. Like I think all of that is what makes me me, or what makes the appeal what it is. But I think with the openness, I'm learning how to practice discernment, and learning when to be open, how open I should be, and also knowing that like there should always be enough saved just for myself. That's what I think has gotten better about me in adulthood,
Mhm.
is being open, but now knowing how to be discerning about it.
Good. So if you could give a piece of sage advice to high school students now, what would that be?
Just be a kid. Just really enjoy the now. And I know that it sucks hearing that. Like I recognize, like people would say that to me all the time when I was a kid. I'm like, what are you talking about? Because in my head, adulthood was like that represented freedom to me. That represented like I'll finally have an opportunity to create the life I want. And I wasn't wrong. It has. But I think at the same time, as much as like my environment wasn't ideal, there was probably still like a lot of dreamy, wonder like, childlike things I could have participated in at the time that I just did not. Choose the things that are going to like create the memories that you want to remember. The moments where like you're just kicking it with your friends and you're laughing and you're just allowing yourself to be like really cherish those moments more and really allow yourself to like learn more about who you are and like actually really sit with your emotions. Like why do you feel insecure, or why are you downplaying yourself so much? The more we're open to like sitting with our emotions and being honest with who we are, it creates a pathway for us to be not only vulnerable with others but with ourselves. And I think also allows us to like heal in real time rather than waiting 10 years to do it. But I think foremost is just be a kid. Like don't take on more responsibility than you have to. Like if you have a choice to struggle or not to struggle, always choose not to struggle. Always. Because like those moments will not last and you're going to get older and look back and you're going to wish like I wish I had been kinder to myself. I wish that I had more fun. I wish that I had more memories. So I think just really be a kid. Just be where you are right now and cherish that.
No regrets.
Mm.
As few regrets as possible.
As few regrets as possible.
Yeah. Right. So we're going to actually round out this
Mhm.
interview coming back to your present self, who you are today. Tell me 3 self-care practices or techniques that you do now to help center or regulate yourself.
The first thing is actually a pretty new thing. It's something now where I journal, but I journal by recording myself talking. And that helps me because I struggle with anxiety and paranoia a lot. So like when I am spiraling and like into deep destructive thought, listening to that audio again, it centers me back to a place where like I wasn't anxious or I wasn't paranoid. So it helps me to like be able to listen to myself when I was most grounded. And also like, a lot of the best wisdom comes from you. It doesn't come from outside of you. Being able to like track my growth through those audio notes has been really helpful. I've also been getting into like more movement work. So like I've been taking heels classes, so learning how to dance in heels. And that has been really helpful. I move a lot differently now, Tiro.
Oh, I know.
So that's helpful just to like move, just to like really get to know my body. We learn about so many things before we even learn ourselves. And so now like I do a lot of work with just like being kind to my body as well. If I want to hug, like actually hugging myself. Or if I want to be caressed, like actually doing that for myself before I look externally for it. And I think the last thing is I'm figuring it out. I would say there isn't an answer. I think maybe that is the self-care answer, is just really allowing myself to figure shit out. And I think that requires a lot of patience and time. But I think I'm just like enjoying the adventure. And so I think that's the third self-care tip, is to just release and let go and allow life to take you where it's going to take you. Like treat every day like there's potential for adventure. So yeah, I think those are my 3 things.
Those are 3 very good things.
Yay.
Having the presence of mind to do all these things that you're talking about, the journaling, the sort of just being present in the moment, allowing things to happen, not being afraid of things coming to you, and then trusting your ability to process all of that. That's really, really powerful. And I think you're starting to see the power of that and how it's helping you now.
Yeah, I think for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm actually falling in love with myself, like, or allowing myself to. which is, I mean, I wouldn't say it's nuts because I'm 23. Like I feel like that's regular, timeline for
Mm.
most 20 something year olds.
Mm.
But it just feels good. Like I actually care about myself now. Like, I care about what happens to me. I care about being protected. And I think before, it's not that I didn't care about myself. I just didn't think I was worthy of being protected. I didn't think I was worthy of good things. And now it's just like, no, I am. And not only am I worthy of them, but I can be an active participant in acquiring those good things and sustaining them in my life. It feels good to be able to like recognize and walk in my power every day.
Take up your space, girl.
Yeah.
Take it up. Well, this was an incredible insight into a brilliant artist cracking open her brain. So I do appreciate that. I know how hard it is to take that moment to be vulnerable and to reveal things about yourself. But I think there's also power in that. And I think your fans, can appreciate the fact that you're sharing where you come from and the struggles that you had and how you're building yourself from that forward. I think there are so many people who are going through now what you were going through as a kid. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to use this kind of platform, was to demonstrate that there are tons of people who walked in, these adolescents' shoes, and they're coming out and they're okay. They are more okay. They're not still struggling in the same way that these teenagers are struggling now. And it's heartbreaking as a teacher of adolescents to see these kids go through what they go through, including you, because I saw it, a lot of it then too. But to know that there are ways that they can learn to be successful and learn to respect themselves and learn to appreciate themselves and their value and their worth, and that it can be actively applied to a community like Thespians, like Spring Valley, the greater Spring Valley. And if I can play any part in that, great. I've done the right thing then. I've done a good thing then.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, you have been a part of that for so many kids and so many young people. So I think that is like a feat in and of itself to be able to say that. So thank you so much, Tiro, for like the mark that you left on me, and also for like having this conversation, because I think I have a lot of reflecting to do. I really like I left high school and I feel like I buried all of that in the closet and I just kept on going, because a lot of it was hurtful, and heartbreaking. But I think like I have to be willing to like unearth that ugliness, the stuff that I don't want to look at, to actually figure out like, what's next, and also what is the meaning of this.
And what were the good things? Because there were lots of good things about the person that you were and the things that you did and how they have built into the person that you are now. I
Mhm.
still see my little tiny Melissa, but she's now growing into this sort of self-possessed, more sure of herself version of that girl. And it's a beautiful thing. I love seeing that.
Yeah, it is. It is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tara. I really needed that reminder. And I'm so happy like this happened on, the year anniversary. I like, we kept pushing it back because child, yeah, you know how
Yeah.
to go. But like
Time is not our friend.
I think the timing was perfect. So thank you.
Well, congratulations on a year of Millie's being born.
Yeah.
And hopefully she will live a very long and prosperous life.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
hope so too.
Well, on that note, thank you, Miss Melissa Denizard, aka Mele. And tune in next week for our next installment of Change for the Better, the power of arts in education. Thank you. Yay.